Greetings, everybody. This is Terrence Harris, and today it is April 14th. I want to start from the beginning. I want to take today to start from the beginning because of a few different reasons. One, because this is something new as far as recording these on Substack. I'm literally recording from my computer into the app. And the last episode, I felt like really allowed me to give that writing a feeling of being alive. Like I wanted it to feel like it was living. And no better way to do that than to show up and share my energy and sentiment personally. So let's get all of the, as we would like to call, house cleaning out of the way, right? All of the source coding. Maybe that's what I'll call it, right? We want to shout out Miss Yasmin for being our first subscriber, Miss Michelle as well for being our first yearly subscriber. We also want to thank two new subscribers, right? EJ, which is Miss Sharon's mom, who was mentioned in one of our last articles. Um, Definitely somebody who I want to shout out because of their care. Just as a quick story, I met them at the Sculpture Garden about a year ago, and they purchased some still growing merchandise. But more importantly, at least in my heart, they bought me a case of water. Now, anybody who truly knows me knows that water is my love language. I'm literally sitting here at 8:50 in the morning with my liter of water. I literally make water for myself every morning. I boil the water and I mix it down. I add the limes and the salt and I mineralize it. Like, water is a big deal for me. So shouts out to Miss EJ. And then also we want to shout out our new monthly subscriber, Kiera. That's somebody who I've known for a few years. They've been following the platform. So house cleaning, source coding done, right? Just wanted to give those shouts out. But that's not why we're here, right? Like I said, we want to start from the beginning as far as just why we're even doing this. Okay. So I'm going to be pulling some excerpts and I'm going to be following from my first Substack. So everybody who's in the paid subscribers can easily go and see this writing. It's the very first writing that we did. It's called The Source Code, Why I'm Building Newports and News. So that's why I want to talk about that today. For everybody else who's listening to this, while it's still free, or if you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple, I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know if they stay up there for longer periods of time. That's why I said all of this is new. This is the new, we're starting a new episode, right? So that's why I'm going over all of these prerequisite things. Like, I don't know what's going to happen to the podcast after 4 weeks. I just know that the writings go behind a paywall. This is all new to me. So we are learning this together, and that is what your investment goes towards, is ensuring that this is possible, even, right? The capability of me to write and source information, sit down, pay my rent, along with distribute this on multiple platforms with the technology that is required. So without any further ado, right, I want to talk about sovereignty and the spectrum of survival, right? So the spectrum we're talking about is from survival to sovereignty. This is something that I talk about in the first article that I mentioned earlier. Um, and that's why we're calling this the source code. To be completely honest with you all, I don't actually prefer that name. That was a name that when I was trying to determine what to call it, I was consulting with my friends and family. I started putting it through a large language model. For anybody who doesn't know what a large language model is, that is what people use when they are using AI. So whether you're using ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, right? These are large language models. So while going through that suffrage of a process. I finally came down to calling it the source code, even though it makes me cringe every time I say it because it sounds so cliche and it sounds so doctored. But I do have to create a form of entertainment here, right? I can be a very scholastic person. I can watch a very boring video for 3 hours and, digest that very well. But I wanted to make this an interesting and meaningful space and a vulnerable space for people who are consuming and receiving information differently. Maybe they don't read those dense texts of articles that I write. Maybe you're driving to work and just want to catch up with me. Maybe you're listening to this from Substack. I just wanted to create options because I know everybody's life is different. And that's kind of like what the beginning of that writing is all about. It talks about my birthplace. It talks about me being from Virginia, me making my first music project. And what I feel like isn't as important today, but is important in the past of how I became is that, my parents got divorced when I was about 9 years old. And from there, I ended up living with my dad. One of the first traumatic events or unfortunate events, I would say, is like we had this really nice house in Newport News. It was a 4-bedroom house, backyard, front yard, all of that. And, we lost it when they divorced. And then so I moved to an apartment in a neighborhood that's not as affluent. And I lived there with my dad, which was already pretty unorthodox for the average young black man or child growing up in America. You typically end up with your mother. But, my dad is a military veteran. So, long story short, with that, the courts proceeded to leave me with him or give me to him. I don't know how that works. But after that, I was eventually like trying to just navigate that environment without knowing too many people. And I stumbled upon, an illicit trade, right? I started selling weed to my friends. I was already smoking weed just because of just trying to find a medication or a therapy or a way to create um, disassociation from how painful and confusing my life was at the time. And it was also allowing me to like connect more with my friends who also had their own traumatic and confusing upbringings, right? A bunch of just confused little boys who had, problems or, animosity or frustration with what was going on at the house. My friends were way less academically profound or proficient than me. So a lot of them were struggling in school as well. And that was something that we all coped and communed with, right? Was smoking. But very shortly, I started to recognize my dad's own financial instabilities. So by the time I was 13, I was selling the weed that I was buying so that I could recoup the money. Just as a little story, right? My dad, because he's like this stoic black man that doesn't want to be identified as like the trope of a single parent, he would actually pay for my lunch, even though they would send the paper there for him to be able to sign it and get me free lunch, which he actually probably made too much money now that I'm looking back at that. Like, I don't know if there was a financial like threshold for that as far as, oh, you have to make this less of money, right? You can't make more than this amount. You know how food stamps are. I believe in Philadelphia, it's like somewhere around $36,000 annually. And because my dad was a retired Air Force veteran and a government contractor, I'm sure he made a sufficient amount of money. But he didn't talk to me about that. He just said, and I quote, we don't take no handouts, right? And he proceeded to pay. So when I would get to lunch, number one, the lunch was horrible anyway. And we're getting to the 10-minute mark. So I'm going to take a pause in that story because typically I like to keep these under 10 minutes, but as we can see, it's going to be longer than 10 minutes today. So I hope you enjoy. If not, let's just give the opportunity to announce that we are at 4 subscribers. The goal is 10. Once we get to 10 subscribers, the goal is to be able to produce a visual version of this consistently. I'm today deciding to commit to releasing the written articles once a week on Mondays, and then I'm going to release this version on Wednesdays. The audio version will come out on Wednesdays. I'm going to commit to doing that at least bi-weekly, if not every week. That's just so that I can actually digest the work, go through the analytics. I am the only person administrating this entire part of my business. I also have other businesses, so please bear with me. The goal is to do all of this myself until we get to 10 subscribers. And then hopefully, within this transmission, maybe somebody hears this consistently and wants to help volunteer. But until then, the next goal will be 100 subscribers so that I can pay someone to help me with this. But to wrap this part of the intermission up, I would like to say that these are the goals that we have. So I'm very grateful for anybody who subscribes and shares this. So yeah, let's get back to the story, right? So, due to his stoicism, he would pay for my lunch, and the lunch was horrible, as I'm sure most of you who've ever been to public school know. It's not the most nutritious or delicious meal. So I usually would pass on it, or because someone else in the lunchroom isn't eating their lunch, you can always kind of get access to the lunch despite if you go through the line. At least that's from my lived experience. And so I would take half of the money he gave me each week. He would give me $60 each week. I would take half of that money, and then I would go buy some weed, and then I would sell enough to recoup my money, right? I did not know what the word recoup was. Back then we called it reing up. So this was just like an introduction to the business acumen I have today in practice. But I would buy my little weed and I would sell enough and then smoke the rest. And then I would just continue to do that probably every week until I turned about 15 or 16. And then I started diving deeper into that. But this isn't a 101 on drug dealing. So we're going to move on. Fast forward to about after I graduated a few years later, just traversing my own hardships, which I will get into in different episodes. This is not the episode for my personal hardships. It's just to give an overview of why we started Newports and News. In 2015, my friend Sean Mentis, he came back from Philadelphia because he went to college after we graduated high school, to the University of the Arts here in Philadelphia. I'm sure all of y'all have heard of it. If you haven't, it was a school specifically for artists, but then it eventually closed down because of accreditation issues and funding. Once again, not the episode that's not what we're here for. But point being, when he came back to Virginia, Facebook connected us. I would see him, giving some interesting commentary, to say the least, on Facebook, and it intrigued me. Along with myself, I was a bit radicalized by then myself, saying some things that would oftentimes scare my family. They would be like, "Man, he is going off the deep end." I'm pretty sure all of you all have that family member that looks like they're going off the deep end. Two things can be true at once. I was finding myself, and yes, I was going through some very, very tough times. So my only outlet was social media. So when I would see him post online, I just reached out and I wanted to compliment him on his work because he was posting music. This is where he got me caught up on all of the information that I'm sharing with you all today, as far as just his personal life journey, going to college and etc. What I recognized very early was that he was constantly looking for a job. Every time I talked to him, every time I saw him, he was looking for a job, but he had a bachelor's degree in audio engineering. So that was a big disconnect for me because I willingly didn't have a job, at least not a full time one. Sometimes I would work maybe a job just to get some, like discounts on shoes or food or something like that. But by the time, I graduated high school, and started truly being in my environment, to say the least. I was like proficient at making money from my trade. So I wasn't looking for a job, to say the least. And I used to actually feel very bad for him because it just didn't seem appropriate that he had spent all that time and money going to school but couldn't find a job. So part of me wanted to take that initiative to just help him, but then I also saw it as an opportunity for me to transition lifestyles, right? And that's exactly what happened. We formed a bond. We threw a show in Virginia. It went exceptionally well, considering no one was doing that type of stuff at the time. This is like 2016. We're taking an independent artist route. Um, and eventually I got to Philadelphia with him. We returned here because I pretty much suggested it to the effort of him always mentioning people in Philadelphia. And it sounded like he had a thriving network here. So I just said, look, man, I don't have a very productive, safe life here anyway. You'll hear and see in one of my articles that I had got shot um, in my house, in my bed. Once again, this isn't the episode for that. So I was completely willing to move away. And so we moved here. I opened up, we moved here in 2017. And then just to take a step back and add some nuance here, the way I came up with the word Newports and news, I typically never tell this story because it's not as relevant and I don't have as much time and opportunity to expound on it in the spaces that I'm normally in. I'm usually at an event or doing something in public that requires my attention, but today is just us, right? One of my plugs, this is what we call somebody who sells drugs to other drug dealers. My plug at the time, back in like 2014, 2015, his name was Chop. And he had a website called VA Hip Hop Music. That was what he was attempting to, um, I mean, I guess a civilian would call it washing their money. But at the time, we called it trying to go legit, right? If you're actually in poverty and subjected to the environment of crime and violence and displacement, your only day to day objective is to go legit for the most part. Obviously, there are exceptions to every rule. You have cold blooded murderers and criminals, just like you have cold blooded capitalists and racists, right? But we would like to believe that most people have great intentions in the world. And so his dream was to fund this website and highlight other artists and people in our community. And when I saw it, I'm going to be honest with you all, it wasn't the most um, quality assortment of artists, right? The artists were very inconsistent with their craft. The website didn't look very proficient. And I had actually just dropped out of school for information technology. Like I mentioned, my dad was a government contractor, so he had been showing me Windows and how to use a computer since I was probably 10 years old. So I was proficient in using websites. And when I saw his website, I was like, this is not a good website. So at the time, it didn't really spark my interest because, he was my plug and I had my focuses on re up. um, but after he got locked up and I met Berlin, it started making me think about just how to have a voice in my community. Mind you, this was my first inspiration to do something other than, sell drugs as a young adult. I thought I was going to sell drugs, and my goal was to just turn 25 years old without going to jail so I could beat that statistic and hopefully make it to 30 so I could retire and save up money, right? Move to Miami, Scarface dreams, right? But up until I met Berlin, or Smooth Waffle, Sean. He has many names. I probably interchange those names as we continue to tell these stories. And my friend, he wasn't just my plug. He was my friend, Chop. Um, Between those two interactions was where I came up with the idea for Newports and news. as I was trying to just be in different environments and clean up my act, I would spend time at this place called the Moroccan Academy, which was also a drug laundering facility, crime syndication, but it had nice books and crystals and massage therapy and healing modalities and community inside the space during the day. And so that's where I would spend most of my time, just to relieve myself from being out on the actual streets. So by the time I like interwove those three elements, that's how I created Newports and News. I created a little website for it, and my first client was my friend Berlin. And my efforts were to protect him, as well as legitimize my own practices in business. And that looked like me starting this platform because, I just felt like a lot of my friends and associates didn't have effective, efficient, or any, for that matter, management, distribution, and administrative tools. Didn't know that these things were called at the time. There was another very, very hard event in my life that occurred. My friend Jeremy, aka Worm, he got shot to death during a drug sale. And at the time, I was listening to Kendrick Lamar, To Pimp a Butterfly. And there's a song at the end of that album called Mortal Man. And the song's lyrics are, when shit hits the fan, are you still a fan? Right? And he proceeds to repeat that. And then at the end of the song, he has a conversation with what would be Tupac today if he was living. And he made a very poignant and almost scary point that most black men lose the will to fight for themselves, for their people, and for what is right by the time they're 30 years old, just due to, being encumbered by society and work and family. And I made a promise to myself and Worm, Jeremy, at the time, that I wouldn't become that I would follow my dreams, and that I would continue to like lead in the ways that we needed. A lot of my friends dealt drugs, went to jail, or died. So, and they still do that to this day in Virginia. You know what I mean? There isn't any outlets like there are here in Philadelphia. There's no infrastructure or community leading you away from that. So, this is like my life's work, is to just continue to be on this path. And that was a day that I truly committed to the effort of going legit. I'd started studying publishing, watching artist interviews, writing more proficiently, and just spending all the time that I had off the streets learning how to complement Berlin, but also create something that could outlast me, something larger than myself. And that's when I started pouring into the idea of Newports and News more and more and more. And eventually I got to the idea that this was going to be the place where Black people could be owners and executives, and that it would be cool. Because oftentimes I recognized that the disconnect in the music industry was that these artists were these eclectic and these creative people, and they were being managed and distributed by college graduates, sometimes who were not even too aware of what was going on in the genre, let alone the culture, let alone the communities that culture develops inside of, right? These just were regular college graduates who either were, brought in from different states, different communities, different ethnicities. These were just regular jobs to these people, right? When you're in accounting, when you're in logistics, when you're in distribution, when you're in the tech, when you're in the finance, like, it's just a job to you, respectfully. And I recognize that because dealing drugs was just a profession to me. Doing music became a profession to me. Even to this day, the whole music business, Newports and News thing, is just something that I'm good at. It's something that I've studied well. I am not your traditional creative. I didn't go to church and play in the choir. I didn't have any training. I didn't go to school for this. This is just something that I put the time into. So I just wanted to give like a deeper story about Newports and News and how it was actually created. this is what created it. It was like a combination of these factors. Um, so now we can get back to where I was at before I took a step back, which was by 2019, I had opened up my own studio, which was just in alignment with the ownership and the distribution and the point of leverage that I believed all artists should have, even to this day. Before they should interest themselves in trying to sign away their publishing and their rights and their likeness to a larger conglomerate corporation, you should try to get your own studio, your own product. You should start to earn your own money, create your own LLC, you know, and hopefully be able to generate a profitable, which means sustainable business. I held that space until 2023 simply because I had such good business practices. I mean, we had 7 streams of income, which I was studying from plenty of mentors that I've had all throughout my life, that you should have 7 streams of income minimally if you want to become a millionaire. And that was my goal. I wanted to sell that business. For my exit strategy was going to be $1 to $3 million. Um, I wanted to have an EBITDA that reflected our annual income. I had it all planned out, right? Some of those streams of income were like selling tickets, being able to sell the actual venue as a rental, clothing and merchandise, right? Memberships, content development, right? Monetizing content online through social media and YouTube, along with being able to create like partnerships and licensing and things of that nature. So there were just a bunch of things that I knew that I wanted to do in order to get to that point. But eventually I had outgrown the space. A lot of people were coming to this space in demand for me and not the space, or they believed that if they purchased a rental that automatically included me doing the video work. And so I eventually wanted to be able to like share my abilities and my capabilities outside of the space, along with the fact that my business partner at the time had a different um, goal in life. Initially, they wanted to spread their entrepreneurial wings. We were initially co-workers at a phone store, and they had spread their entrepreneurial wings. They had scratched that itch. It had been 4 years. And one thing I told her was, instead of me going to school and going into debt, if I'm going to go to debt or risk anything, I'd rather just practice the business and that be my education. And that was one of the best decisions I made in my life. Was I spent that same $40,000 to $50,000 over that 4 year period, basically paying the rent, which would have been the same amount of money I would have paid to sit in a classroom. But I got the hands on experience all at once. So we're going to start wrapping this up. I just want to remind you all again, if you did listen this far, that because this is, I mean, we're almost at 30 minutes, and it looks like this might have to be the actual framework of these episodes. I don't see myself actually getting these done in 10 minutes, but let's try it, right? Let's see if we can condense these into 10 minutes. But until then, enjoy my long dissertations and explanations of these stories. I'm going to link this source code writing article somewhere in this episode. Check the descriptions, check the actual article itself. It should be there. I'm going to work on templating all of this so that everything is findable. So please leave comments. Let me know where and how I can improve and make this experience better for you all. Um, so like after I closed the studio, right, getting right back to the story so we can wrap this up. Once I got back to, myself, as I would call it, I left the studio, and the first thing I did was I went and got a job because I wanted to do something that didn't require me to be everything all at once. I literally told my friends at the time, I want to do something that doesn't require me to have to constantly be the boss. I was like, I just want to bag groceries or something. And that's what I did. I went and worked at a grocery store. During that process, I remembered I was reintroduced and reacquainted to how unhealthy these work environments are. I'm not going to spend too much time here because I just get too passionate about it. But I mean, the level of demoralization in the employees, the level of micromanagement and aggression that goes into managing and I would call like policing people in a space of work, the level of surveillance, the level of people's actual like demoralization, just going back to that word again, like on both sides of the counter. I mean, the people at the register couldn't even afford the groceries. They would complain, they would grieve coming from work. I mean, it was these spaces that we are tasked with working at are just, especially I was in customer service. So man, I mean, it was a rarity to talk to somebody with good energy. But working with the people there, I mean, the place I'm at currently is in a full blown union fight with the company. It's a mess there. So I can tell you, I've said it without telling you that very shortly I recognized this was not the place that I was going to thrive in. Every day I was attempting to figure out how to get out of there after about the first 3 months. Eventually, around 2025, I was able to find my outlet, my personal outlet that led me out of actually working there. This is how Still Growing was born. Some of you might have met me through the Still Growing journey. As of recently, I've been working on that since about late 2024, and then I premiered it in 2025. So thank everybody who's been a part of that journey as well. A few people who I want to mention here at this part is Tony Lavelle. She was very instrumental to that process, along with Sheen Anthony. Them two really played significant roles in me being able to show up for myself consistently because I had forgotten how to, let alone I had never done it before. This is so key. Even though I was still promoting Newports and news, I was still creating things just as a outlet for myself, doing digital community work, increasing my following on social media. Like my personal business was still elevating. I had finally gotten an LLC. Look, guys, I was operating this entire time without an LLC until about 2024. So, I was getting some things in order for myself, but as far as just like truly trusting everything that I've shared with you all today, I did not have trust in myself. I constantly needed somebody else's approval or assistance, even though I didn't need it. I wanted it because I did not trust myself completely. So those two were very integral to that as well. And even as I was navigating that and I quit my job in late 2025, I was homeless for a little second, but I had to trust that I would see it through. And I did, right? I was able to pull some resources together. A few friends had helped me as well. And, I started developing the bonds that are thriving today, at this current moment, where me and her share a space. We're in community with Sheen, Neptune 21, Chevelle, you know, and also Neptune's partner, Angie. So things have definitely materialized and crystallized into exactly what it is that I am, right? It's not out of a want or need, but it's just simply a reflection of who I am and have always been. So the reason why we put this all on Substack was because Instagram cannot handle 40 minutes of me. As you can see, I would have to put out countless posts. YouTube, as I was alluding to earlier, is much more of a lift than I can hold myself. I always try to show up there consistently and I never can maintain it because there's so many components that are required to do it. So I would love to have a partner. And I would also like to show up there consistently because I do have the capacity to show up once a month, which is what I'm going to do and what I've always done. But I typically just put up rough, videos of me talking without scripts on YouTube. And it's not the most searchable content, so it never gets the traction it needs. We have to produce an actual show. And so that's what this is lending to, is turning these Substacks, turning this source code into living episodes that can go on YouTube, and people can actually find us more effectively, and so that we can monetize it as well, because Instagram doesn't pay out, and I'm tired of giving Instagram all my good work. We also want to use Facebook, right? Because when we create that long form content on YouTube, we can also distribute it on Facebook, and along with even the short form content that we do want to post on platforms like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube alike. We just want to have a sufficient and consistent system for that. I don't want to keep hopping around and jumping around. So I decided to have everything live here on Substack first, because this is what feels natural to me, to be able to write in details, to be able to give my full elaborations, for me to be able to compose things without so much logistical effort and such a heavy lift. So I just want to thank you all again for who's investing in this. Currently, we're working on, like I said, getting 10 subscribers so that we can sustain this experience of writing consistently, and also providing these audio reviews and updates as well. And then I can let you all know now, because this is such an intimate space. And if you made it all the way here, you a real one. I just want to shout you out if you got all the way here, because you are a real one. We are working on our next 3 events for Still Growing, right? And anything that is produced from Still Growing is just a subsidiary of Newports and News. This is me creating an asset and an intellectual property underneath the Newports and News conglomerate umbrella, right? It's all interconnected, I promise you. Don't ever let that go past you. Some people think that I'm not doing Newports and News anymore, and it's because, no, I left the space so that I could be a media platform. That's why, if you notice, this Substack is mentioned and brought to you by Newports and News. The source code is brought to you by Newports and News, right? Terrence Harris is the CEO and owner and founder. Hopefully we can get a new CEO one day, because Lord knows I don't be feeling like being the CEO, but you know how it is starting that business. You're everything. But yeah, man, like Still Growing is going to have 3 events this year, right? I'm going to do an event where we plant food, because I want to start directing Still Growing into the agriculture space. Right now, we practice wellness, streetwear, and community. And the 4th leg of that table is going to be agriculture, because that is what sustains us. That's what's going to also reveal some of the products that we're going to be developing long term for the brand, because it's a lifestyle brand. It's not a clothing brand. Clothing is how we were able to, create the first monetary offer, but Still Growing was initially a music project. So I will be sharing that with you all first and foremost. I'm just preparing everything for that experience so that it's as good as I can make it, just like we've been discussing here about the visual and audio content. So the first event will be June 5th. It will be a seed planting. We're going to be at a community garden, and we will be planting our own food and also enjoying some sound healing and some food and some community as well. And I feel like it's very important to do that on an actual farm or garden, if you will. And then our second event will be a DIY hat event, right? We're going to have the hats that everybody loves. We're going to design them together in that same setting. And then finally, drum roll. I don't have a drum, so pat something, I guess. um, I'm going to start a Still Growing annual event, guys. Yes, I'm going to start a Still Growing annual event, and it's going to be called The Harvest. Y'all are actually the only people hearing it first. If you made it this far, you are literally the only people hearing it in public. The only people who know are my coordinators and my girlfriend. But every year during the harvest season, during fall, we are going to do an annual event commemorating all the things and all the people whose support is still growing every year. So that's all I got for y'all, man. That's it. We are 40 minutes in. I have been running my mouth. I had so much to share. Like I said, I'm going to somehow put the article in here. It is in the paid section. So everybody who has paid can see the inspiration and the root of this episode. If not, I think you can do like a 7-day trial if you just want to see it. And then if you want to cancel, feel free to cancel. That's an oxymoron. Feel free to cancel, but I encourage you to stay because what you're paying today is only going to be compounded over time. I'm going to continue to add things here. So as long as you're paying, you're getting more. So yeah, I'm going to leave you all with that. I do not want to exhaust your brains or your time any further. Please share this, subscribe to the Substack, and I will see you all next time.